One of the most insidious tactics our society utilizes to placate, subjugate, and control us, especially those of us on the left, is this idea of meritocracy. The rather idealistic notion that capitalists insist against all evidence is reality, that the harder one works, the more successful one will be. It's a frankly ancient idea used as a rhetorical tactic to defend capitalism. If you're not rich, it must be because you're not trying hard enough, or you weren't smart enough to take chances when they were presented. Of course, we on the left know this is nonsense, but sadly this cancerous ideology has seeped its way into mainstream consciousness and often leads to poor people working horrible jobs to blame themselves for not working hard enough, when of course in reality it's the system letting them down. This used to be me before I became a beta male leftist soy boy cuck. I used to get very depressed on a regular basis because I used to constantly blame myself for my shitty job and unfortunate position in life. I have met multiple people in various jobs I've had over the years, mostly in call centres, who genuinely believe that they will succeed or be promoted if they just work harder, prostitute themselves to their employer, volunteer for all the overtime, offer to take on extra responsibilities, and allow themselves to be thoroughly exploited, only to be passed over in favour of someone less deserving, time and again, and not learn or change their behaviour based on this at all. Putting aside the fact that the existence of overtime basically only exists to allow companies to underpay employees as well as understaff while getting the same amount of work done, there's always used to confuse me, until I tried to speak to some of them about starting a union and their immediate response was, "I don't want to rock the boat," or "If I have a problem I could just talk to HR," despite the fact that they themselves admitted that the company was exploiting them. You see it all the time, pervading our culture in insidious ways. Just look at those guys you see in the gym wearing shirts with shit about hustling on them, or co-workers who post cringeworthy memes like this one, despite the fact that their job is just as shitty as yours and has little to no opportunities for progression regardless of how hard they work. It's practically a religion at this point, the amount of normal people who go on and on about hustling, despite having no concrete evidence that it has any kind of positive impact on their lives. The cult of hustle. The fact is that whilst those who succeed are often, though by no means exclusively or even overwhelmingly, hard-working, we seem to have interpreted that to mean that exhibiting these traits is a guarantee of success. It just requires patience and allowing oneself to be thoroughly exploited by the capitalist class as a show of deference, which is patently not the case. To put it in a slightly clearer way, hard work does not guarantee success. Hard work is not a prerequisite for success. It's correlation versus causation, basically. Okay, I hope that's cleared a few things up. Without further ado, let's jump straight into talking about popular culture in a desperate attempt to garner clicks. The existential crisis of Ali A. It's probably a bit of a surprise for you to learn that I don't play video games as someone who lives an incredibly sedentary lifestyle and basically exists on the internet. And I'm not exactly against video games at all, but I never really got around to getting a new console this generation, and at this point I can't be bothered with them. I loved Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood and Skyrim, and Bugs Bunny Lost in Time is objectively the best game ever made, and I was really into gaming as a teenager, but it's not something I have any strong feelings on either way nowadays. I can just as easily read a book, watch a movie, or more likely spend 14 straight hours watching incredibly in-depth YouTube videos about swords and avoiding the comments, because the overlap between right-wing trolls and people who comment on YouTube videos about swords is surprisingly large. However, whilst I probably won't be buying a PS4 or anything until I either have a better paying job or Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, I do know about Let's Players, partly because I used to be really into the Yogscast back when they first started doing Minecraft stuff. Shadow of Israfel is the Firefly of Let's Plays, though I stopped watching a few years ago because I stopped being interested in watching other people play video games. PewDiePie is of course the most famous and popular one of these, however he's not the one I want to talk about. Sure, he's an ignorant racist and clearly did not work harder than almost everyone else in the world to amass his enormous fortune, but everyone loves to go on about him and he's not even all that interesting to me. No, the person that I want to talk about today is Ali A. This probably isn't even all that much of a controversy, since popular though he may be, it seems like everyone fucking hates him at this point. However, I wanted to use him as a case study to deconstruct this concept of meritocracy, and my partner likes watching his girlfriend's channel as well as the channel they share as a couple, and over time I've slowly built up a genuine hatred for him, even through this non-active participation with his work. She's alright, his girlfriend I mean. She comes across as quite shallow, but other than that she's fine I guess. But he gets me angrier quicker than basically anyone else in the world, for the simple reason that all the content I see of him just displays his arrogance, materialism, and self-aggrandizement. Probably the most prominent example of this is his fucking car, which he never seems to shut up about. But the thing that really inspired me to write this whole section of the video was this one video the two of them, him and his girlfriend I mean, did about their new house, which they bought, I'm assuming cash, to which my response was basically,
"This house is a vulgar display of wealth."
Allow me to briefly delve into it with you. Bear in mind, this guy is a 24-year-old man who got rich from making clickbait videos of him playing Fortnite, which I'm reliably informed is a popular video game played by people who are so insecure in their relationships that they'll refuse to interact with other women in public. Mike Pence has a lucrative career as a Fortnite streamer once he retires from government, apparently, and his girlfriend's the same but for The Sims, because apparently people still play The Sims, which was news to me. According to Google, their combined net worth is around $7 million or £5 million, the vast majority of which is Allier's personal wealth. After the dreadfully overproduced intro, we're told that these two young people now own a house that looks like it costs at least 20 times the average UK salary in a country where more and more people are struggling to get by, and barely anyone under the age of 35 can even get a mortgage. Most of it's fucking inane bollocks to drag out the watch time, but some of it's just pure showing off. Like, Allier takes the time to remind us that he has 2 luxury cars for no reason, for example. The overwhelming majority comes across as almost a sales pitch, like they're enthusiastic estate agents trying to sell you on this house, except it's their house and you just get to look at it, whilst being reminded that due to skyrocketing rent prices and falling wage rates, you will never be able to have this. Never. Not because you didn't work hard enough or didn't deserve it, but because of an economic system that prioritizes dishonesty, manipulation, and exploitation. So yeah, they go on about all the changes they made to the house. Once again, like they're trying to sell you on how great it is, except you don't get to go there. Also, the editing is so fucking obnoxious, holy shit. Oh, and then it just goes into the minutiae of how their various PC setups are going to go, which is riveting. I know how this can seem, by the way. I've been accused of jealousy before when I've voiced similar complaints, especially from people who have benefited from the current system, and I understand where that criticism comes from. Why can't you just be happy for them, Matt? Why drag people down rather than building them up? Don't get me wrong. If you're lucky enough to become that successful doing what you love, then fine. Honestly, well done for escaping the endless, depressing grind that is normal work under capitalism, but don't you fucking dare pretend that you got there through hard work and nothing else. And to everyone else, don't dare pretend meritocracy exists whilst Allier maintains his riches. Just a reminder, these two people play video games for a living and bought a house most people can only dream of. Don't sit there and tell me they work over 300 times harder than a school teacher, or that I should sit back and be happy for them when there are nurses relying on food banks to survive. I'm not going to lecture you about who does or does not deserve wealth, but to me, this video perfectly demonstrates beyond a shadow of a doubt that wealth is not distributed based on what one contributes to society, but is almost entirely arbitrary. Success does not equal hard work. Okay, so obviously that was an overblown breakdown of one case study, but this is not just restricted to YouTubers. A common response to anti-capitalist rhetoric is to respond by saying, but doctors work harder than bin men, studied longer, etc., which is an interesting point, so let's for the moment concede that it's true. I actually think it's more complicated than that, but let's leave that for now. If a doctor should be paid more than a bin man, should a CEO be paid more than a doctor? A call centre manager gets paid more than the starting wages of nurses and teachers. Do call centre managers work harder than nurses? I would honestly struggle to think of anyone who works harder than nurses, to be perfectly honest. And I work in a call centre, and I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, they do not work harder than nurses. Or we could just use the obvious example, that being the super rich. Regardless of how hard you work, no one deserves or needs more than like 6 figures at the absolute maximum, and even that is pushing it, and yet you will constantly hear defences of them in the vein of, they worked hard to get where they are, as if that means anything. You know who also works hard? Fucking bin men. They wake up at 3 AM, do an essential but dirty, smelly and unpleasant job no one else wants to, and if we truly lived in a meritocracy, they would be some of the highest paid members of our society. But they're not. So how do we work out how much harder than the rest of us the 1% work? Well, I have a simple answer for you, in the form of an equation. Their salary divided by your salary. It's literally that simple. It's the method I used to calculate the disparity between Allier and teachers earlier. After all, if we're each paid according to the difficulty of our jobs and the effort required to perform them, it makes sense that someone who works twice as hard as you gets paid double what you earn, right? Let's take Jeff Bezos, for example, the richest man in the world. He has a net worth of about $141.8 billion, or just under £108 billion, $40 billion of which has already been made this year. A nurse's starting salary is £22,128. Assuming we live in a meritocracy, Jeff Bezos would have to work between 1,807,664 and 4,880,694, depending on if you use his earnings so far this year or his net worth, times harder than people who work 12-hour shifts doing some of the most thankless, draining, and difficult work as possible to do. Does anyone really believe that he does that? And if not, can we finally put this whole ridiculous idea that capitalism is a meritocracy and that the rich are rich because of hard work to bed and start start to focus on things that are real instead. All of this, of course, is without mentioning that the necessary implication of this meritocracy idea is that if the rich are successful because they just worked harder than the rest of us, the inverse also necessarily has to be true. So, the rich are rich because they worked hard, yeah? Well, by making that assertion, you also have to believe that the poor are poor because of a lack of hard work, and therefore you are literally making the poor are just lazy argument beloved of factory owners and aristocracy during the Industrial Revolution. Well done. Conclusion. Meritocracy is a ludicrous idea that only exists to preserve the status quo and to prevent people from stopping to realise that actually, most of the time the rich are rich because they were lucky, had opportunities the rest of us didn't, had particular skills our society values, exploited their workers, and are likely to be a literal psychopath. If you believe in it, all I can do is urge you to rethink your position, because you come across as ignorant, callous, and unempathetic. I hope that I've at least made you think a little deeper about the implications of your ideas, if not actually changed your mind. Obviously, I'm not exactly coming up with the world's most original ideas here, but I come against this often enough for it to warrant this kind of response.
Grab that with the other arm, and again just drop the backpack and get stuck because the scabbard.
Garbage day!